Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in a time when fear and suspicion were just
Yeah.
everywhere?
Yeah.
And like your neighbor, your friend,
Right.
even your own family
Yeah.
could turn against you based on the flimsiest accusations.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into one of the darkest chapters of American history,
Oh, absolutely.
the Salem witch trials of 1692.
Um,
We'll unravel how a small, deeply religious community in Massachusetts
right.
became consumed by paranoia, and how the seeds of fear ultimately led to the tragic deaths of innocent people.
What's particularly striking about the Salem witch trials is how quickly seemingly ordinary events just spiraled into a full-blown crisis.
Right.
We're talking about a community where belief in the supernatural wasn't just commonplace.
Yeah.
It was ingrained in their understanding of the world.
And we have these incredibly detailed firsthand accounts from the time that really bring the events to life.
Oh, yeah.
It all began with two young girls, the daughter and niece of Reverend Samuel Parris, exhibiting very strange behavior.
Right.
They were having fits, contorting their bodies, and screaming uncontrollably.
Now imagine yourself back then. You're living in a time when medical knowledge is limited.
Yeah.
And if a doctor can't explain an illness,
Yeah.
attributing it to something like witchcraft wouldn't be totally out of the realm of possibility.
So Reverend Parris, deeply concerned, calls in the local doctor, William Griggs,
Right.
to examine the girls. But even after a thorough examination,
Yeah.
Dr. Griggs can't find anything physically wrong with them.
Mm.
And so with no other explanation, he declares that the girls are bewitched.
This diagnosis, of course, sends shockwaves through the community. For Reverend Parris, already a man deeply preoccupied with the devil's influence, this confirmation of witchcraft was like a nightmare come true.
And he believed that this was a direct attack on his own family, a sign of their piety, and perhaps even a harbinger of the apocalypse. The tension must have been palpable.
Absolutely. Under immense pressure to identify their tormentors.
Right.
The girls eventually accused 3 women. Sarah Good was a homeless beggar, Sarah Osborne, an impoverished elderly woman, and Tituba, an enslaved woman working in the Parris household.
What's interesting to me is that the first 3 accused were already among the most vulnerable members of Salem's society.
Their social standing, or lack thereof,
Yeah.
certainly made them easy targets. They were outsiders.
Right.
Individuals who didn't quite fit in and therefore easily demonized. Think about the power dynamics at play here.
On March 1st, 1692, all 3 women were arrested and brought before the authorities for questioning.
Wow.
Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne vehemently maintained their innocence.
Right.
However, Tituba, after enduring what we can only imagine was intense pressure
Yeah.
and perhaps even physical abuse, confessed. But her confession didn't end there. She went on to claim that there were other witches lurking in Salem waiting to strike.
And this is where things take a truly dark turn.
Yeah.
Tituba's confession, whether coerced or not,
Right.
fanned the flames of fear and suspicion that were already smoldering within the community.
Mm.
It validated people's deepest anxieties, giving them a tangible enemy to focus on.
The atmosphere in Salem became thick with paranoia and distrust.
Yeah.
Neighbors started accusing neighbors, friends turned on friends, and families were torn apart by suspicion.
But amidst this growing hysteria,
Yeah.
there were those who dared to question the validity of the accusations. People like Martha Corey,
Okay.
a well-respected woman in the community,
Hmm.
who openly challenged what she saw as baseless claims and childish fantasies.
What happened to those who dared to speak out against the accusations?
Unfortunately, dissenting voices were often met with swift and brutal consequences
Wow.
in a community gripped by fear.
Yeah.
Any opposition to the prevailing narrative was seen as a sign of guilt.
So speaking out against the witch hunt could actually make you a target. That's incredible.
Exactly. In March of 1692, during a Sunday church service, young Abigail Williams, one of the original accusers,
Right.
had another one of her fits. This time, she screamed pointed at Martha Corey and accused her of witchcraft, claiming to see her suckling a yellow bird.
This public spectacle, with its dramatic accusations and vivid imagery, must have had a profound impact on the congregation.
Absolutely. It reinforced the belief that witchcraft was real and present in their midst.
And despite her reputation and her staunch denials, Martha Corey was arrested and imprisoned, her fate now hanging in the balance. But her story, sadly, was just the tip of the iceberg. In the coming weeks, the witch hunt spiraled out of control, ensnaring dozens of innocent people, men, women, and even children.
Oh my. It's important to understand that these accusations weren't random. They often targeted individuals who were already on the fringes of society, those who didn't quite conform to the rigid social norms of Puritan Salem.
You're saying that those who were different, who stood out in some way, were more likely to be accused?
Precisely. Take Bridget Bishop, for example. She was a woman known for her independent spirit and outspoken nature, traits that weren't exactly celebrated in Puritan society.
Right.
She was also accused of dressing flamboyantly and owning a tavern, which only fueled the suspicion surrounding her.
So in a way, she was already an outsider, someone who challenged the established order.
Yes, and her nonconformity made her a prime target for accusations. On April 18, 1692, Bridget Bishop was arrested and brought before the magistrates for questioning. What's striking about this particular case is how theatrical the accusations against her became.
In what sense?
Well, the girls who accused her, they were masters of theatrics.
Wow.
During the hearings, they would shriek, convulse, and claim to be under Bridget's control. It was quite a spectacle, one that played directly into the community's deepest fears.
It sounds like they were putting on a performance playing to a terrified audience.
In a way, they were. Their behavior served to reinforce the belief in witchcraft and further fueled the panic that was gripping Salem.
It's hard to imagine the terror that Bridget Bishop must have felt facing these accusations with seemingly no way to defend herself.
She maintained her innocence throughout the ordeal, stating that she didn't even know what a witch was. But her words fell on deaf ears. The magistrates, swayed by the girl's performance and the growing hysteria, were convinced of her guilt.
So despite her pleas, Bridget Bishop was sent to jail to await trial. What were the conditions like in the jail at that time?
The conditions in the Salem jail were horrendous. It was overcrowded, filthy, and disease-ridden.
Oh.
Many of those accused of witchcraft actually died in prison before ever facing trial.
It's a horrifying thought to be accused of such a heinous crime and then left to languish in those deplorable conditions.
Bridget Bishop's trial began on June 2nd, 1692. Over the course of the proceedings, more than 10 witnesses testified against her, claiming that she had bewitched them and their families.
Really?
They described vivid dreams, strange occurrences, and even a cursed pig that they claimed to have purchased from her.
And what kind of evidence was considered admissible in these trials? Was it based on concrete facts or something else entirely?
This is where the concept of spectral evidence comes in. It's a truly chilling aspect of the Salem witch trials. Spectral evidence was based on dreams and visions, on the testimonies of those who claimed to have seen the accused spirit tormenting them.
So if someone claimed to have dreamt that Bridget Bishop was harming them, that was considered valid evidence against her in court.
Unfortunately, yes. It's a testament to how deeply fear and superstition had permeated the legal system at that time. Spectral evidence was given significant weight in the trials, and it played a major role in securing convictions.
It's a stark reminder of how dangerous it can be when fear and prejudice are allowed to influence the pursuit of justice.
Despite her repeated claims of innocence and the lack of any tangible evidence against her, Bridget Bishop was found guilty on 5 counts of witchcraft.
What was her sentence?
She was sentenced to death. On June 10, 1692, Bridget Bishop was hanged on Gallows Hill, becoming the first victim of the Salem witch trials to be executed.
Her story is truly heartbreaking, a tragic example of how easily an innocent person could be swept up in the tide of hysteria and condemned without a fair trial.
And sadly, Bridget Bishop's story is just one of many. The trials continued, reaching a peak of frenzy over the summer of 1692. Jails overflowed with the accused accusations, flew freely, and the community was consumed by fear and paranoia.
It's almost as if a collective madness had descended upon Salem. What finally brought an end to this reign of terror? Was there a single event that marked a turning point?
The tide began to turn when accusations of witchcraft reached the upper echelons of society, even touching the governor's wife.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, those in power who had previously turned a blind eye to the escalating situation were forced to confront the reality of what was happening in Salem.
It's as if the accusations hitting closer to home made the governor realize the trials had spiraled out of control.
That's right. He intervened, abolishing the special court that had been established to try the witchcraft cases. He also implemented much stricter rules regarding evidence, making it far more difficult to convict someone based solely on spectral evidence or unsubstantiated claims.
So those languishing in prison finally had a glimmer of hope. What happened next?
In May 1693, by order of the governor, all remaining prisoners accused of witchcraft were released. Over time, many of those who had been involved in the trials came to regret their actions, expressing remorse for the injustices they had participated in.
Is there any evidence that attempts were made to officially atone for the wrongs committed during this dark period?
In 1711, the Massachusetts legislature passed a bill exonerating the victims of the Salem witch trials and offering financial restitution to their families.
Wow.
While this was a belated attempt to right the wrongs of the past,
Right.
it was a significant step towards acknowledging the grave mistakes that had been made.
It's incredible to think that something like this could happen in colonial America. What factors do you think contributed to this mass hysteria that gripped Salem?
Well, there were multiple contributing factors at play.
Right.
Religious extremism, for one, played a crucial role. The Puritans of Salem held a deep-seated belief in the devil's power and were constantly on guard against his influence. In their minds, any perceived deviation from religious norms or social expectations could be interpreted as evidence of witchcraft.
So in a way, their rigid worldview made them more susceptible to these kinds of accusations.
Precisely. Then there were the social tensions and economic inequalities that existed within the community.
Right.
Many of the accused were already marginalized individuals, those who were poor or different or who simply didn't fit in.
Right.
They became easy scapegoats for the anxieties and frustrations that plagued the community.
And we can't forget the role that the young accusers played in fueling the hysteria.
Right.
Their dramatic performances and vivid testimonies, even if fabricated, had a powerful effect on those around them. It's almost as if their accusations became a self-fulfilling prophecy, shaping the community's perception of reality.
It's a classic example of how the power of suggestion and groupthink can lead to a distorted view of the world. In a climate of fear and suspicion, rational thought can easily give way to paranoia and mob mentality. The Salem witch trials serve as a chilling reminder of how quickly a community can turn on itself when fear takes hold.
It's a story that continues to resonate with us centuries later. The events in Salem offer valuable lessons about the dangers of religious extremism, the importance of social justice, and the need to safeguard our legal system from the corrosive effects of fear and prejudice. So to our listener, we leave you with this.
Yes.
What aspects of this historical event struck you the most? And what parallels, if any, do you see between the events of 1692 and the world we live in today?